For more on AUKUS and other geopolitical issues, we are joined by James Heappey. He's the UK Minister for Armed Forces and Veterans for a CNA broadcast exclusive. Minister, pleasure to have you on the show. First off, I want to start with your expectations for the AUKUS meeting. What can we realistically anticipate to come out of the first meeting of the defense ministers in Washington this week?
Oh, no, this is just a routine meeting where Ben Wallace is getting together with his counterparts from the US and Australia to discuss the AUKUS program. I'm not anticipating any particular announcements.
Minister Heappey, during the first UK-ASEAN ministerial meeting in Cambodia in August, an agreement was reached to deepen security ties with this region to enhance maritime security and cyber defense. Tell us, what does the UK have to offer ASEAN, and what are the main focus areas for London?
Well, I think the UK has a great deal to offer in this region. This is an incredibly vibrant region with a number of really dynamic, fast-growing economies, real growth in your tech sectors. And so, of course, the UK, like so many other European countries, is seeking to be involved here from a trade perspective. But of course, if you want to trade in a region, so too is it right for that region to expect you to play a role in the security of that region as well. That's why I'm here this week, to meet with your ministers to look at what more the UK could and should be doing with the Singaporeans, but also with partners around the region. The UK has a set of armed forces that have real global reach. Last year, we had our carrier strike group here in the region, and we hope to continue to be engaged in a positive way as we seek to build friendships that are based on both security and prosperity across Southeast Asia.
Minister, your Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, has indicated the possibility of pursuing a NATO-style alliance of free nations to defend against Chinese aggression. For ASEAN countries that prefer neutrality and non-alignment, how is the UK going to position itself in the region?
Well, I'm not familiar with that exact comment from the Prime Minister. I think what he said at the Mansion House, his speech in the City of London the other night, was more along the lines of it's not the golden age of a UK relationship with China that David Cameron and George Osborne heralded 6, 7, 8 years ago. We're now in a different time. But the UK understands very well the concerns of countries across this region who don't want there to be a very binary confrontation. They want China to be held to account as a major economic and global power and to take the responsibilities that that brings with it. But so too do countries across this region want China to be respected as a really important global economic power with trade links that are extensive, not only here in Southeast Asia, but across the world. That's why the Prime Minister said that the UK needs a robust relationship with China, but one that is founded on respect, a requirement for China to take the responsibilities that it should, but recognizing that China is an important part of a global economy and that countries in this region do not want there to be unnecessary confrontation.
Minister, let's expand on that comment. As you say, the Prime Minister describing the golden era of relations as coming to an end. One Tory MP recently said that the UK has been asleep the last 30 years to the threat that Beijing poses. And we know China is expanding its army, its air force, and now has the world's largest navy. Can you tell us specifically, how is the UK's strategic approach to China evolving as Beijing's global influence continues to grow?
Well, look, the UK recognises China as a systemic challenge that the UK must rise to meet. We have allies in the US and Australia who are similarly committed to meeting that challenge. But that doesn't mean it needs to be unnecessarily confrontational. The reality is that as the US national security strategy recognized recently, China is an ancient civilization with every right to play a role on the global stage and with every right to be a leading economy. The simple issue is that with that comes the responsibilities of being a leading power in the world. And I think it right that the UK and our allies seeks to hold China to that standard, seeks to work with China on the great issues of the day, like climate change, for example, trades with China even. But when China threatens a rules-based international system, it's right that we hold them to account for that as well.
And Minister, there's rising speculation that Taiwan could become a major flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific. Your Prime Minister has said the UK could send weapons to the island. How far is the UK willing to support Taiwan in the event of a military crisis or conflict? And how would this gel with the UK's relationship with Beijing?
Well, look, I think it's really important that everybody is clear that the reason that UK ministers are engaging in this region is not because of our concern over China. Quite the opposite. It's the fact that we see in this region a large number of really dynamic, quickly growing economies across ASEAN with whom the UK wants to do business. And we recognize that if we want to trade here, we have to also be part of the security solution here. That means respecting the view that countries in this region take about how it wants to deal with its neighbour. But specifically on Taiwan, the UK does not support any unilateral action by either side to change the status quo.
The South China Sea, it's a major trade corridor connecting Europe and East Asia. And the UK has said that it wants to increase its presence with regular deployments. China saying the idea of a British presence in the South China Sea is dangerous. How do you balance being confident but not confrontational in this region?
Well, look, I mean, I think that it's not for any one country that borders an international waterway to say that any other country is not welcome in that international waterway. And all that the UK, the US, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and many other allies from Europe and from within this region do is assert a right to freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. Nothing more, nothing less. That's not confrontational. That is just a confident adherence to international law.
And Minister, turning to other geopolitical concerns, the UK is, of course, one of the biggest military donors to Ukraine. As the winter looms and the ongoing conflict fuels steep hikes in the cost of food and energy, what's your take on how long this conflict will go on for? And what are the best and worst case scenarios that you're looking out for?
Well, I'm afraid I think that the conflict could go on for some time yet. Clearly, the best case scenario is that Putin realizes that the last year has been a horrible mistake, that he has needlessly cost tens of thousands of lives of his countrymen, and he decides to leave Ukraine now, and the war is over. That would be the best outcome. The worst case is that Putin decides to continue with this folly, but he should be clear, as we are clear, that we will continue to support Ukraine so that this ends on President Zelensky's terms, nobody else's.
Minister Heappey, thank you very much for your time this morning. That was James Heappey, British Minister for the Armed Forces and Veterans.